Today, on Historical Moments, we're talking about one of the most significant events in modern history, the 9/11 attacks. Specifically, we're going to explore why Al-Qaeda targeted the World Trade Center and what motivated this devastating attack. The attacks killed nearly 3,000 innocent people and were a horrific act of terrorism. But if we want to understand our recent history and how we got to where we are today, we need to look at the reasons behind these events. So let's start with the basics. Who was Al-Qaeda in 2001? Al-Qaeda, which means the base in Arabic, was founded in the late 1980s by Osama bin Laden and other militants who had fought against the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. After the Soviets withdrew in 1989, bin Laden turned his attention to what he saw as other threats to the Islamic world, particularly American influence in Muslim countries. By the late 1990s, Al-Qaeda had established training camps in Afghanistan under Taliban protection, and had already carried out attacks against American targets, including the 1998 US Embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania, and the 2000 attack on the USS Cole in Yemen. Now, let's talk about their stated motivations. Osama bin Laden actually wasn't secretive about why he was targeting the United States. In 1996 and again in 1998, he issued what he called fatwas, religious declarations essentially declaring war on America. His grievance fell into several main categories. First and most prominently was the presence of American troops in Saudi Arabia. After the Gulf War in 1991, the US maintained military bases in Saudi Arabia, home to Islam's two holiest cities, Mecca and Medina. To bin Laden and his followers, this was an unacceptable desecration. Foreign, non-Muslim military forces stationed in the sacred land of Islam. He called these troops Crusader forces, deliberately invoking the medieval religious wars between Christians and Muslims. Second was American support for Israel. Bin Laden condemned US backing of Israel in its conflicts with Palestinians and other Arab nations. He saw this as America taking sides against Muslims and supporting what he viewed as the oppression of Palestinians. Third were the sanctions against Iraq. Throughout the 1990s, severe international sanctions on Iraq following the Gulf War led to significant humanitarian suffering. Bin Laden and others pointed to estimates suggesting hundreds and thousands of Iraqi children died due to malnutrition and lack of medical supplies, blaming American policy. But here's where it gets more complex. These political grievances were wrapped up in a much larger ideological framework. Bin Laden wasn't just opposed to specific American policies. He saw the United States as the leader of what he called a global assault on Islam. In his worldview, America represented Western secularism, which he believed was corrupting Muslim societies and preventing the establishment of true Islamic governance across the Muslim world. He viewed pro-Western governments in countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt and Jordan as puppets or apostates who had abandoned Islamic principles. And because the United States supported and protected these governments, he saw America as the far enemy, the power that needed to be struck to weaken these near enemies in Muslim countries. Al-Qaeda's ideology was also rooted in an extremist interpretation of jihad. While most Muslims understand jihad as a spiritual struggle, or where applied to warfare defensive fighting, Al-Qaeda promoted the idea that killing American civilians was religiously justified and necessary to defend Islam. So why the Twin Towers specifically? Why those targets on 9/11? The World Trade Center wasn't chosen randomly. It represented several things to Al-Qaeda. Most obviously, it was a symbol of American economic power and global capitalism. The towers housed major financial institutions and represented New York's status as a global financial capital. But there's also a history here. The World Trade Center had already been targeted by Islamic extremists once before in 1993, when a truck bomb exploded in the parking garage, killing 6 people. That attack was carried out by a group with links to individuals who would later connect Al-Qaeda. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who became the principal architect of 9/11, was connected to that 1993 plot. The Pentagon, another 9/11 target, obviously represented American military power. And the 4th plane, which crashed into Pennsylvania after passengers fought back, was likely headed for either the Capitol or the White House, symbols of American political power. The attacks were designed to be spectacular and symbolic. Al-Qaeda wanted maximum visibility, maximum casualties and maximum psychological impact. They wanted to strike at the heart of American power, economic, military and political, in ways that would be impossible to ignore. Now, we should also talk about what Al-Qaeda hoped to achieve. Based on bin Laden's statements and Al-Qaeda documents, they had several strategic goals beyond just killing Americans. They wanted to provoke the United States into overreacting, into invading Muslim countries and getting bogged down in costly, unpopular wars that would drain American resources and create more anti-American sentiment in the Muslim world. They hoped that the attacks would inspire Muslims worldwide to rise up against Western influence and pro-Western governments. They wanted to be seen as the vanguard of a global Islamic awakening. And they wanted to demonstrate that America was vulnerable. In their propaganda, they often portrayed America as a paper tiger, appearing strong but actually weak and afraid of casualties. They believed that spectacular attacks would expose this weakness and cause America to retreat from the Muslim world, much as they believed their attacks had driven the Soviets from Afghanistan. Here's the crucial thing to understand. Al-Qaeda's ideology was extreme and represented a tiny fraction of Muslims worldwide. The vast, overwhelming majority of Muslims rejected their interpretation of Islam and their tactics. Islamic scholars around the world condemned the attacks. But Al-Qaeda was able to recruit by exploiting real anger over American policies in the Middle East, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the sense among some Muslims that Western powers were hostile to Islam. They took legitimate political grievances and twisted them through a violent, extremist lens. So, to bring this together, why did Al-Qaeda attack the Twin Towers? The attacks were driven by a combination of specific political grievances: US troops in Saudi Arabia, support for Israel, sanctions on Iraq, and a broader extremist ideology that saw America as the chief enemy of Islam, and believed that spectacular violence was both religiously justified and strategically necessary. The Twin Towers were chosen because they symbolized American economic might, and because attacking them would create the kind of devastating, media-saturated spectacle that Al-Qaeda believed would achieve their goals of provoking America, inspiring Muslims, and demonstrating that the United States could be struck at its heart. Of course, things didn't work out the way Al-Qaeda planned. Rather than retreating, America invaded Afghanistan and Iraq. Rather than inspiring a mass uprising, Al-Qaeda's brutality turned many Muslims against them. And rather than exposing American weakness, the attacks united the country, at least initially. But the consequences have been profound and long-lasting. 2 decades of war, hundreds of thousands of deaths, trillions of dollars spent, and a complete reshaping of American foreign policy and domestic security. Understanding the motivations behind 9/11 doesn't make the attacks any less horrific or any more justified, but it does help us understand this pivotal moment in history and the world we're living in today. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.